guys, welcome back to the Base Brief. This week we're talking about the rolling Christmas blackouts, the Twitter Files COVID edition, the biggest airline meltdown of all time, and our very online roundup. Let's jump in. Okay, if you can't tell by my voice already, I am quite under the weather, and I think, Brad, you are too.
Yeah, I'm dealing with allergies like crazy, so I think it's because I'm at my mom's, and she has tons of cats, and I am allergic to cats. And the first couple days I was fine, but now I'm really starting to feel it.
Yeah, I can hear it in your voice. I was feeling a little bit under the weather, like literally from the time I got Phoenix, I had a cough. And then over the weekend, obviously we're going to get into this in a minute, but it was so cold. I was having to walk him out in it. We lost power at one point, and something about that combination really put me over the edge. So I have been quite sick all Christmas.
So,
also, side note, Phoenix is on a tear because he had to be so good over the holidays with my little niece in the home, and he was great, but now he's hype, so he might be a little bit more vocal this episode than usual. I apologize in advance.
So social media already knows this and had quite a field day in the comments section, but my mom actually got me a set of crystals, a starter set for aligning my chakras, mostly just to troll me because she remembered me making fun of Hannah for her crystals. So one of my Christmas presents was a starter set of crystals.
When you sent this to me, I laughed out loud for probably 5 minutes. I thought this was one of your mom won Christmas with that. That is one of the funniest trolls I've ever seen, because you did give me quite a hard time. And I will say the funniest part about this now is you own more crystals than I do, because I only have one. And I don't really know anything about crystals. I just like the little crystal I bought, and I stand by that. But now it looks like you've really, dipped your toe in the water a bit, so you'll have to educate me on what a chakra is. I have no clue. I did think that was funny. Well, also, we had a great Christmas at my house. One, because my niece was there, like I mentioned. She was definitely the star of the show, and she's such a fun, happy baby. And Phoenix actually did really good. He was very sweet with her and the cats. But nobody wants to play with Phoenix, because even though he's only 12 weeks, he's already so big that, everybody's scared of him, and he doesn't understand. I feel so bad for him. So he did do great. And then we did a family photo shoot yesterday, which was fun. We haven't done an official.
Does so many photo shoots.
We're kind of the men in my family will tell you they're not into it, but they high-key are. We get very into it. We have a color palette for our photo shoots. Everybody can kind of pick what they want to wear, but you have to stay within this palette, and we really do get into it and like it. So we had a great time. I just put one of the sneak peeks online, but we'll get him more soon. So it was pretty good. You're still home though, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
I just got home last night back to Atlanta. So anything else fun happen over the holidays?
No, nothing crazy. I got to see a couple of my college friends while I'm back here, so that was
nice. That's awesome. Well, I want to dig into our first story, which has impacted me. Like I said, my family's power went out. I got home on Friday, so the night before Christmas Eve, and I had read that it was going to be an exceptionally cold weekend, but like a true Southerner, it kind of went over my head. When I read 16 degrees or 15 degrees, that doesn't really register to me. I don't know what that means exactly, and so I knew it was going to be cold, but I didn't pack gloves, I didn't pack hats, I was just I had a coat, but I was, I never really thought, I was I'll be inside, I'm just going to go outside to walk Phoenix at most, so who cares? So I get home. My mom and I were doing the dishes, and I was, talking about how cold it was, and I was like, oh my gosh, what if somebody lost power somewhere up north or something? That could be really dangerous. My mom was like, people are losing power, Hannah. And then, foreshadowing, but within 6 hours, our power cuts out around 10:30, and we were not prepared. We had no flashlights ready. My phone wasn't charged, was on 20%, and we go into panic mode because we have a baby in the house, and she's only 8 months old, so she actually cannot be placed under a blanket still because they could suffocate themselves. And so it just keeping her warm all of a sudden became a big issue. We did have a fireplace, but it's a gas fireplace. And in order to run it without carbon monoxide getting in, we had to open the flues. So there's still cold air coming in, and it's not emitting that much heat because it has a fan usually that can't run without electricity. Long story short, it was freezing in our house, and it didn't come back on until 2 p.m. the next day.
Wow.
So we were without power for a long time, and it turns out this was happening all over the country. Our government got us rolling blackouts for Christmas. So I kind of want to update people on what the picture looks like if you weren't impacted and were lucky enough to keep your full energy during Christmas. You're quite fortunate because there was an Arctic blast. Obviously, it swept across the country over the weekend. And the extreme weather, which according to the National Weather Service, it was a major and anomalous storm. It put the country's energy grid under significant strain. And they had 7 states that experienced power outages on Christmas Day, according to Newsweek. Now, these figures figures are a bit outdated because they said that according to poweroutage.us, which is a service that monitors power outages across the country, they said more than 175,000 customers across Maine, New York, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Vermont, and Virginia are without power. But they did not mention South Carolina, North Carolina, Texas, Tennessee, all of which I am very well aware were also without power and experiencing blackouts. So I don't even know what the full number was, but it was a lot of people. And as of right now, we know that 28 people in New York have died from the extreme cold and the chaos caused by the storm. So this is a pretty significant issue.
So yeah, I mean, it's serious as a heart attack. Like you mentioned, people literally died from the extreme cold and the chaos caused by the blizzard, and then you had all these energy companies essentially like rationing and pulling the plug on people. The increased demand for energy led Duke Energy and the TVA in Tennessee to pull the plug on their own customers amid freezing temperatures. And they say that these emergency outages are necessary to protect the energy grid against longer, more widespread outages. But I agree with something you wrote in our show notes, which is this is third world shit. And it kind of is, but it's also kind of like a policy choice in many ways. Grover Norquist pointed out that he's been to many countries where this happens, but they used to be called third world nations. And that this is a government-created energy famine, he said, which I thought was an interesting perspective on it. The Wall Street Journal editorial board has an editorial where they explain how kind of green policies have altered the vulnerability of America's electric grid in a way that natural gas is very efficient and able to ramp up production and everything, but it's been hampered as people switch to renewables or, in some cases, still rely on coal. But if more people were relying on natural gas that's been hamstringed by green policies, they would be able to ramp up electricity generation by different sources when some are disrupted in different ways. It's all pretty complicated, but that's one of the contributors to this big blackout that we're seeing.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out there's a couple things going on here, and I wholeheartedly agree. These are policy choices, but you first had extra strain on the grid system because there was unprecedented temperatures and because you had so many more people trying to heat their homes at a higher level than normal, right? So that placed a lot of strain. But you also had a lot of the companies asking people basically to reduce the amount of electricity they were using, and when they could not get it under control with that, they made a choice to actually pull the plug on people. Like my power just went out because of the strain on the grid, but other people around us, they were getting blackouts for like 2 to 3 hours where they would just shut down blocks of the city to conserve energy and try to quote protect the grid. And I really like Adam Millsap is a friend of ours who works at within the Koch network, and he said blackouts in the U.S. are largely a policy choice. With our wealth and natural resources, we could have abundant, reliable, and resilient energy. Our self-imposed inability to build prevents it. And that's 100% accurate. In Tennessee, the TVA there is actually a government-owned monopoly, and they were doing rolling blackouts. My friend Braden, who's an attorney in the state, he said, I can't believe in 2023 at age 47, I am living through rolling blackouts for the first time like it's London in 1940, and we've got incoming bombers. This can't happen in America. And I think that, like, that was my take. I saw a lot of people just sort of, like, be like, well, you know, it's just really cold, and this just is how it is. It's like, no, this is not just how it is. This isn't how it should be. This is not normal, and this shouldn't be occurring in a first world country, especially over a time where you have freezing temperatures. And as pointed out, like these are life and death decisions. My niece could have died. My sister-in-law had to stay up with her all night and just kept like putting blankets on her and watching her like a hawk just to keep her warm. Like older people died. We already said, 28 people died in New York. This is not a just, roll over and take it kind of situation.
Yeah, some of the power outages are unavoidable. Like if a storm takes out an electric pole, and like that happened in my mom's neighborhood, so her boyfriend lost power, though we didn't. That's like you can't stop that. But when the issues that are caused from the surge in demand, like breaking the system, then it's not actually the storm causing power outages, though it's behind the surge in demand. It's the failure of the grid. And so that percentage of the power outages are ultimately rooted in policies. And you put some stuff in our show notes about this that was interesting because you know more about this than me. But this is part of the problem of having often government owned and regardless, essentially what monopolies granted by the government in charge of all of our utilities in most states.
That's exactly right. I don't know if most people are aware of this, but you have about 36 states that still have what's known as a monopoly market on energy. And that is not naturally occurring, right? They like to say that this is because energy is so expensive to build the infrastructure. You basically have to have government come in and do it. And then they need to have everybody reliant on this one service because that reduces the cost per person. And like, that's always been the argument. But these are government granted monopolies. It's not that other companies would not spring up and compete. And so that's a huge problem. In some states like Tennessee, it actually is a government owned entity, the TVA, that has the entire source of energy. In places like North Carolina and South Carolina, it's just Duke Energy. You don't have any other competition. You don't really have any other choices.
I'm just shocked that they're not doing a bang up job. Just shocked.
Right. Well, as Forbes puts it, when utilities are granted local monopolies, they operate on a cost-plus basis. Businesses operating on a cost-plus business have no incentive, shocker, to implement innovations that will reduce customers' costs or improve service. In fact, the easiest way to earn revenue is to operate with a bloated cost and then apply a percentage margin to this unnecessarily large cost structure. Due to these adverse incentives, inefficient investments and large cost overruns are rampant in monopoly markets. And so this is what I mean when I say the monopoly power position. That's a policy choice, and it leads to corruption. It leads to people not investing in the infrastructure. It leads to cases like we saw bribery with the Illinois Power Company, where you literally had them like giving kickbacks to legislators to get sweeter deals for themselves. So like tons of cronyism. You also have legislation that you often see where they legislators will push through bills that will basically let these monopoly companies fine people or tax them if they use solar or other kinds of energy to recoup their losses from it. DeSantis actually just vetoed that kind of bill in Florida. So it's not just that it prevents them from investing more. Like, we should have better grid systems. We should have a stronger grid system. The reason we don't is they're not reinvesting that money to strengthen it. It's a very corrupt system. And so I think this is what people need to start to recognize, is like, this isn't something that should be the case or that has to be the case, but it's been this way for decades and decades and decades. And that is why we're falling behind. And that should infuriate people. We just passed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill this year. Where is it? Right? Instead of going into things like this, that I would argue are actually essential services that, you know, I could see a case for government getting involved in, I don't see it going into this kind of thing. Instead, they're putting in Tesla charging stations, right? Like electric car charging stations.
Bill was unrelated to actual infrastructure, right?
Totally.
Or it was like broadband internet or other things. Like you mentioned, Tesla electric chargers and stuff. I mean, but yet we have a incompetent power grid.
Right. And not to mention, like, how many billions have we sent to Ukraine right now?
We'll be up to
how
100 billion after the latest round goes through.
Yeah, and you covered a good bit of what was in this past omnibus bill they passed last week, but just tons and tons of money going to absolute crap instead of to these basic services.
Oh, I don't know. I think we really need to spend millions on the Michelle Obama hiking trail. That to me seems like a top constituent need.
Oh, they are infuriating. One other thing I want to point out with, though, is in this whole debate, you said this earlier, and I think this is true. Some of this is due to a push to move to green energy solutions during the current administration that they're trying to progress to, one, far too quickly, and two, which are just not necessarily sustainable for a country this size. But I do think there's some common ground we can find here with climate change activists, because a lot of them actually would like more diversity in the kinds of energy we can opt into. And I think that's something that is currently hamstringed by regulations, by these monopoly powers. I found this statement in another article I'll link, but it said Democrats and Republicans should all agree on giving consumers access to competitive electricity generation that supports technological advancements and provides better energy services and solutions to fight climate change and provide better energy security. Climate change can only be solved through affordable energy solutions that can be developed quickly, and the market is the only person that is going to actually produce those quick solutions. The government-backed monopolies are never going to do it. They're not even going to tighten up our current infrastructure system. So I really think this is something that we should be able to like form coalitions around and get together on.
So Hannah, speaking of the power grid melting down, we also saw probably the biggest airline meltdown that certainly in recent history that I can ever remember. Southwest is not doing so hot. It ended up canceling more than 2/3 of its flights over the past few days during this storm, and it was a hot mess. Somehow my boyfriend, he came out after Christmas to join me and my family here where my mom lives. He got on a Southwest flight unobstructed, but everything I see all over the internet is just horror stories about what went down with Southwest.
I think he must have a lucky streak, or maybe all those like phone calls he's put in with his points are helping him out, because he is one of the lucky few not caught up. And actually, we're recording on Tuesday. This is still ongoing. We're talking through Tuesday and Wednesday right now. Southwest is continuing to cancel the bulk of their flights. Let's roll this clip.
Yeah, frustrated passengers are stuck at airports across the country. The return home from Christmas for many has become a flat-out nightmare. This morning,
they said no one's getting on a flight, a Southwest flight, for 4 days, and they said we can't help you go home.
Southwest Airlines melting down in the wake of the Christmas holiday.
Christmas was just ruined. This was the worst Christmas ever.
While 3,800 flights were canceled across the country Monday after the punishing winter storm, nearly 3/4 of them were Southwest flights. And the company has already canceled over 2,500 flights today, with more misery expected this week.
It's been catastrophic. It is simply a failure of Southwest management.
When asked about the collapse, a spokesperson for Southwest blaming the weather.
I think it's just the sheer size of the storm. It's just the fact that this one started west, swept east, and impacted almost every single one of our largest airports, that put us in a position where we struggled to recover, and we struggled to get our flight crews and airplanes where they needed to be.
In a statement, the company vowing we'll work to make things right for those that we've let down. We recognize falling short and sincerely apologize. But this morning, federal officials are launching an investigation into the chaotic response. The Department of Transportation saying it is concerned by Southwest's unacceptable rates of cancellations and delays, and reports of a lack of prompt customer service, adding it will investigate whether cancellations were controllable. The airline's own employees blaming the company for not being better prepared. Some Southwest flight crews are being left on hold for up to 10 hours while they wait for scheduling instructions. From weary travelers sleeping on airport floors to unclaimed luggage pileups, the harsh reality was everywhere.
Unfortunately, our next available seats for rebooking are on the 31st and beyond.
Loudspeakers warning flyers in Houston they shouldn't expect to get a flight out for at least 6 days. Others boarding crowded buses chartered by Southwest. One bus headed from Raleigh to Nashville, a 500-mile ride that will take more than 8 hours.
So what y'all just heard was Good Morning America's little roundup summary of what's going on, and I have to say a couple things. One, I was struck by the Southwest spokesperson just saying, well, it's just the storm, because all the other airlines had a storm too, and they had some cancellations, but nowhere near this bad. And then also, like, the customer service thing was obscene. For example, my boyfriend during his whole affair tried to call and it just hung up on him, and apparently there were up to 5-hour wait times. Basically, their customer service just went non-existent as this went on. So the whole thing is a big mess. Not really sure what the point of a Department of Transportation investigation is. Yeah, but what a mess. I feel so bad for all the people whose Christmases were ruined.
Yeah, I'm currently supposed to be flying Southwest on Friday for my birthday to Nashville for New Year's and my birthday celebration. I'm thinking it might not happen.
Maybe find a backup plan on another airline.
Yeah. And I say this as something that I think people, avid listeners, know this. I used to be the biggest simp for Southwest Airlines. I used to be the biggest supporter for Southwest. I gave them tons of free promo. I loved them. I always had good experiences. That has been rapidly changing over the past year. One, I kind of decided to start moving to Delta because I'm in Atlanta. It's the hub. I wanted to use the lounges, which, by the way, are just totally worth it. But I had a really bad experience on Southwest back in October. I might have mentioned on the show, but I was trying to go to Students for Liberty in Miami. And basically they did this kind of thing to us, and we were just up a creek and had to buy $800 tickets on another airline last minute just to make the event. And they gave us like a cruddy like $300 voucher to make up for it. And they also blamed the weather at that point. And that's significant because when they blame weather, they don't actually have to pay for things. And this is why this is important. This is not a weather meltdown. As you mentioned, the other airlines did not have anything close to this. 50% of all flights canceled around the world were Southwest flights. Delta only canceled 262 flights in comparison. United was second. They had 133 flights, and then American Airlines canceled only 12, but they did have over 790 delays. But yeah, Southwest just dwarfed the competition when it came to cancellations and delays. Everybody's dealing with the same weather issues. That is totally bogus. And on top of that, like you mentioned, just the lack of customer service, lack of explanations. Like, people can't even get through to get rebooked, so they're just going to have to bite the bullet and do what I did and end up paying a lot more to fly another airline, and then Southwest is basically just scot-free, gets to keep the money. So I don't have a lot of faith in the Department of Transportation. I don't really necessarily think it should exist, really, but I do think they should start investigating this, because the honest truth here, and I hate the situation, but like we have to deal with what reality is that the airlines are government-backed. As a whole, we give these companies billions of dollars. We bail them out nonstop.
They're
we
super
overly
highly
regulate.
regulated.
Super highly regulated.
Not a free market.
That's right. There's nothing free market about it. The truth is most of them should have gone under a very long time ago, and we should have better competition. We should have other options that are breaking in, but that's not happening because of the government. And on top of that, most of the regulations, as I mentioned, they go in favor of the airlines, right? Like saying they only have to comp people's other flights or hotels or travel vouchers when there's weather. Like, no, you should have to do that if there's incompetence, right? Like it should be on you if you're the provider, and also if you're getting all of our tax dollars, like then you should be responsible for your own errors as well. And so I really, the whole thing really infuriates me. And on top of that, they're really not even being forthcoming. Like I said, they're trying to blame it on weather, and they're not giving people answers. And I think the whole thing is just unacceptable.
Well, and we actually have some behind-the-scenes tea, courtesy of Reddit. Some anonymous, and I guess we can't prove that they actually are Southwest employees, but why people would lie about this, not sure. Some Southwest employees have gone off on Reddit explaining from the employee's point of view what people can do to make the best of this and why they believe it's happening. One person wrote, on behalf of all employees, we're sorry, we'll give it to you straight. This meltdown was caused entirely by Southwest. It was triggered by the storm, but the failure to recover quickly is on Southwest 100%. If you are still hearing weather almost a week after the storm, it's not true. And the person goes on to explain that this shitstorm is because the crew scheduling software went belly up, and it almost all has to be unraveled over the phone with crew members calling in scheduling. If they had better technology that eliminated the need for phone calls, this would have been fixed by now. And they warn people Southwest will not be getting you anywhere for days, so give it a rest. They even said that your check bags are such a disaster that some of them will be 30 plus days lost in the system. So apparently Southwest is has this like hotline open where you can submit your requests for your expenses, and they say they will honor reasonable requests for reimbursement for meals, hotel, alternate transportation. Good luck. But I guess, yeah, I mean, this kind of incompetence and the failure to develop better software and all of these things, those are hallmarks of a non-competitive market or a much less competitive market or a regulated market. Those things all choke innovation and they kind of breed incompetence. And so Southwest in a free market would probably go under from something like this, but they will not. Yeah, at least with COVID, I'm not sure I supported the airline bailouts, but at least like when governments were locking down travel, it made sense that like they didn't deserve to go under because they didn't do anything wrong. That was just like the world happened in ways that screwed over the airline industry. With this, something like this, I mean, they should not be too big to fail because they deserve to fail for messing this up royally.
Yeah, this is a catastrophe. Like the audio clip said, I mean, you have people on buses, like 8-hour trips now. You have people losing their luggage for months on end. That is completely unacceptable. And I also feel bad for the staff because I will say that Southwest has some of the nicest, best customer service representatives I've ever worked around. One of their union presidents said, with the exception of September 11th, this has been some of the most horrific days that Southwest airline flight attendants have ever had to work through. And I can only imagine the ire and wrath that they're getting because people can't see the representatives of the airline that are actually responsible for this catastrophe. So just a reminder, be friendly to the people in the airports. It's not their fault, but the company itself certainly should have to answer for this. And I would not be flying Southwest anytime soon if it were me, including on Friday. So, all right, let's move on to our next subject. Over the holidays, we got yet another edition of the Dum-Dum-Dum Twitter files, and this one delves into the ways that the government worked with the company to suppress information about COVID.
Yeah, this one came as a real shock to me and Hannah, literally not at all. But so the latest round of the Twitter files, which Elon Musk has been releasing to journalists, he released to somebody named David Zweig. Sorry for the last name. I hadn't heard of him, but he seems to be kind of an independent-minded journalist. He works for Barry Weiss at the Free Press. And Anyway, this version of the Twitter thread, he reports that the United States government pressured Twitter and other social media platforms to elevate certain content and suppress other content about COVID-19. And what was really interesting about this, Hannah, is that he covers it happening under both the Trump administration and the Biden administration. So even Trump's administration was doing this. He says that at the onset of the pandemic, the Trump administration was really concerned about panic buys and shortages, and they came looking to the tech companies to combat misinformation about runs on grocery stores. But there literally were runs on grocery stores. And so they were trying to get them to tamp down on coverage of true things that could stoke panic. And they were actually requesting that they suppress information about this. And that's under a Republican administration. To me, wow, that's a big red flag.
Yeah, and honestly, not shocking either, because was there ever a bigger blowhard than Trump? He wanted to run around his entire presidency whining about censorship, whining about big tech, and then at the same time, he was leading people in this false goose chase against Section 230, which is an excellent free speech law, and failing to actually go after his own agencies who were doing this kind of crud. I cannot with the whole situation. It is infuriating to me, and it should surprise nobody that both Republicans and Democrats were in on this. We've seen across states, Republicans are also passing really bad content moderation bills against social media companies. They're both guilty on both sides, and I'm really just fed up with it. I think it is completely antithetical to everything that our country is supposed to stand for, and I think that people should be more upset than they are. Instead, we really only see people get upset when it's against their camp, right? Like the right was really upset when they was censoring leftists, and then the left is like not caring at all as long as it's going after the right. And it's really infuriating to me.
Yeah, and I will say it got much more pointed and much more direct when the Biden administration took over. So David Zweig reports that when the Biden admin took over, one of their first meeting requests with Twitter executives was on COVID, and they were specifically pressuring Twitter to delete individual people's accounts, anti-vaxxer accounts, including Alex Berenson, who, if folks don't know, he's a former New York Times reporter who's now, I think, he's super anti-vax. He's been one of the COVID truthers all along. I personally think he's a kind of a crank, and he's like the type that will suggest with no evidence that a vaccinated person had a heart attack. Oh, it must be, the vaccine or something, without any evidence of a connection. He'll just insinuate stuff. So I do view his work very skeptically, but that doesn't mean he should have been censored or that the White House should be pressuring Twitter to specifically shut down one information source's account that they don't like, that contradicts what they're saying. That to me, I mean, wow, he had a lawsuit against Twitter and actually got a settlement out of it. So maybe that's why.
I mean, I think this is a really true statement. Martin Kulldorff, who's an epidemiologist on Twitter, he said, in a pandemic, censorship kills. And that's 100% accurate. This is not a small matter. This is nothing to do with science. Science is all about questioning and continuing to question and examine facts and examine all angles. This was a complete totalitarian response to a pandemic, and it got people killed. That is the long and short of it.
I mean, it's hilarious that you just mentioned Martin Kulldorff, because guess who else was a target of this? So this was not, I don't think, related to the government at all. This was just Twitter's internal debate. Martin Kulldorff, who is literally a Harvard epidemiologist. He has the credentials to speak on this like nobody else. He had put out a tweet that says, thinking everyone must be vaccinated is as scientifically flawed as thinking that nobody should. COVID vaccines are important for older, high-risk people and their caretakers. Those with prior natural infection do not need it, nor children. That is an opinion from an expert. Yet, this version of the Twitter files released that the moderators intended to take action and claimed that this violated the COVID-19 misinformation policy. They then went on to flag it with a fact check and prevent it from being shared, liked, or retweeted. And I'm like, wow, so literally a Harvard expert is saying his opinion. You can't say it's factually untrue. It's his medical opinion about the necessity of something. And they are saying, well, actually, Dr. Fauci says something different, so we have to delete this. Like, these people really don't understand why open debate is important. Like, that's the foundation of science.
I don't think it's they don't understand it. I think it's that they've lost the argument. And I think that censorship is the last resort of people who have lost the argument, who really can't stand on their own merits. And that was the case throughout COVID because they had nothing to back it other than one crazy nut job, Fauci, running around claiming that he knew everything and this was true. And everybody saying, you know, it was a cult. It was a cult-like response. I've never seen anything like it. Yes. Like, I mean, to this day, you have people that like hero worship him and think everything he says is Bible. And it's unfathomable to me that the masses that fell in line for this and that continue to not look at anything outside their echo chamber continue to think that a lot of this was accurate, that he was doing a great job, that these things were necessary, that these things, and that even the other side was getting people killed, right? They called anybody who pushed back on the official narrative grandma killers and said, you just don't care about the elderly or the disabled and you just are selfish. And it's like, no, we were actually looking at the real data and information and you weren't. And the whole thing, it's I don't know. Yeah. It's scary. It's really scary to me, I think, is what it really comes down to, because if they're going to do this for a pandemic, they're going to do it for any number of other things. And we're in the age of information. You know, you like to think that that would mean people have more tools at their disposal, can get things right more of the time. But I think due to tribalism, due to the echo chambers that we're in, due to the algorithms we're in, and due to these policy choices that our government is making and pressuring private companies to make, that's really not the case. You're only getting select information that often has a lot of indoctrination and bias in it. And people need to just really learn to question everything, you know, really start to question everything you think, question everything you're told, look at other sides, really try to understand your opponent's argument against things. I think that's always so important. Not only if you want to persuade people to think differently, you need to really understand why they believe what they believe, but also because in doing that, you can often find out that you're wrong, right? You can often find out there's things they know that you don't. And that's true for no matter where you are on the political spectrum.
You know, I've thought that sometimes if I ever want to quit journalism or media or whatever, I'd like to become like a high school civics teacher or economics teacher, like social science. And one of the things I think I would do is have all my students prepare like a debate presentation, like pick an issue, prepare a 5-minute argument speech on like why you think your side of the issue is correct. Then on the day of, when they show up, make them argue the opposite side that they didn't prepare for. And if they can't, then maybe not fail it, but give them, or if they do not a great job, give them not a great grade, because clearly they didn't prepare to argue their case if they can't fully articulate the opposite side's view. I think I could actually make a very emotionally compelling argument in favor of a $25 minimum wage, right? Because I've engaged so much of this content in favor of it. But if you can't, then maybe I could even make an economic argument, though I think it wouldn't actually be true. For $15 minimum wage, for example. And I think if you can't, you probably haven't been thinking critically enough about these issues. But I want to move us along and talk and head into our very online segment, because I was sending myself and sending you like content over the holiday that I was seeing and like, save this. We're going to have to go through this because we came across some real doozies this week.
That's right. Well, the first one is from Twitter. I actually saw it today, and I hadn't seen this account before. It's named Michelle Tandler. They have a good number of followers. Looks like they work in some kind of development role in San Francisco. And they shared some really heartbreaking photos of the temperatures in California, which, by the way, are much better than most of the rest of the country. They're in the 40s, but people sleeping on the streets in California right now. And they said, here is what still confuses me about San Francisco. We have the most liberal left-wing government and population in the country. We have a $13 billion budget, and we will have 8,000 people sleeping in the cold and rain this week. Can someone please explain this to me? And I'm like, honey, you just explained it. You just explained it for yourself, right? Let's reread this. You have the most liberal left-wing government and population in the country. So I responded to her and I was like raising my hand enthusiastically. And I said, yeah, I can explain it. Progressive policies don't work, never have, never will. Free market capitalism is the only system that has reliably pulled people out of poverty and increased quality of life en masse across history. It astounds me, though, that they can write a tweet like this and can recognize we're doing everything that we preach should be done, and yet we have some of the worst problems with homelessness and drug use and poverty in the nation, and
like
not put two and two together.
Close to getting it. They're so close.
So close.
California
But
is
so
just
far
the
away.
perfect example because when you adjust for the cost of living, and I remember reading an article about this years ago. California has like extreme poverty problems when you account for the inflated cost of living and don't just use one standard across all. Despite having the most generous welfare benefits, some of the most generous benefits, and having all these big government systems, this super left wing government, and they just can't. It's like their utopian vision, where else has it been more pursued in terms of like, well, they didn't do the real socialism or whatever. I mean, it's not, maybe not full socialism, but every government program, every agency, this $1 billion local budget, these sky high taxes, everything, and yet their city is a hot mess. I mean, if that doesn't tell you, if that doesn't prompt a little bit of introspection, if you still can't get it, I don't know how. You can't be helped. You can't be helped.
Yeah.
You're too deep in the Kool-Aid.
Beyond the pale.
Okay, so next up we have this. I literally thought this was fake. So I went and I found the original article because people were circulating screenshots of this, and I swore it could not be true. Business Insider introduced us to a woman who charges $480 an hour to help Gen Z and millennial workers overcome their fear of talking on the phone. You can't make this up. And of course she looks like the most liberal Karen ever, her photo. But so Mary Jane Cops is her name, and she set up a consultancy called The Phone Lady to help people improve phone etiquette, according to Insider. And she says she trains Gen Z workers who are afraid to use the phone because they're so used to texting. Is that really a thing? I grew up texting. I grew up with like Instagram in middle school, and yet I still can talk on the phone to people. I mean, but I know young people like this. I actually do, who are so used to texting that when you call them, they're like, this is the fact that something like this could even exist is a little depressing.
Okay, I have to admit though, I'm one of these people. Not to this extent where I have to hire somebody, but and it's not because I grew up texting. I didn't have a cell phone until I was in like 9th grade. I always hated talking on the phone. I remember when someone would like call our house when I was a kid, not just me and all my siblings, like we did not want to answer the phone. My mom would get so mad at us. She'd like, answer the phone, I'm doing 10 things. We're like, no. Like we just had so much anxiety. I get phone anxiety. And even now, when somebody calls me out of the blue, I'm like, nope.
We
And I
talk on
send
the
them a
phone
voicemail.
all the time.
Yeah, but you're my best friend. Like I'm
Oh.
talking like randos. Like
That's
no, like if it's somebody out of the blue, I'm just like I need to have a scheduled call in my books and know and be prepped and be ready to have that. It's some kind of weird like phone social anxiety where I just can't like off the blue do it or off the cuff can't just off the cuff do it. And I don't know, I do get the anxiety. I don't need to pay somebody $400. I can do it in business when I have to, but I am not gonna lie. Unless it's an intimate friend, family, best friend, boyfriend, I do not want to talk on the phone. I don't like it. I want it to be as quick and brief as possible, and I'd much rather text.
Well, we've got to work on that because, like, that seems like a basic skill people need to have. And she is getting away with Business Insider, because it sounds like clout chasing for her to say that she charges this, but they actually verified it with her invoices. Cops charges $400 and $480 an hour for one-on-one coaching and $365 for 30-minute webinars. For corporate workshops, the daily rate is $3,500 that she charges for this. And many of her clients are in the financial sector or startups, according to Insider. And I just have to say, this is something you've also seen with like diversity trainers who charge, like Robin DiAngelo. I don't know the exact numbers, but the author of White Fragility or whatever it is, she charges tens of thousands of dollars for these corporate events. And I think it's because when a corporation gets big enough, it starts to behave a little bit like the government. It has so many bureaucracies and departments that their budgets are so removed from the executives that they start to be very wasteful in some cases. Now, hopefully those corporations will eventually go under if they're wasteful, whereas the government never does. But it's still, it's like, if your corporate department is spending $3,500 to educate your Gen Z people on how to speak on the phone, something has gone horribly wrong somewhere. And I don't know exactly where or how to fix it, but that should not be necessary. And the fact that it apparently is for some people has me a little worried about my fellow Gen Zers here, to be honest.
Well, if you ever get tired of politics and media, you're going to go do something great and teach civics to high schoolers. I'm going to get on a grift like this and find some bogus service I can charge and start making a killing.
Okay, so next up, we've got a tweet from Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. And this, I'm going to read it in my best progressive voice. Student debt cancellation is racial justice. Student debt cancellation is gender justice. Student debt cancellation is economic justice. It's time for GOP politicians to stop standing in the way of this relief. They're doing this thing where when they have a terrible policy, what progressives will do is they'll essentially wrap it in woke bubble wrap. They'll start like throwing around the words racism and sexism and everything to shield their terrible policy idea from criticism because it's actually a turd and they don't want people to see it for what it actually is. And that's what she's doing here. We all know the problem. Student debt cancellation just means making taxpayers pay off affluent people's bills. And it mostly helps white, urban, well-educated liberal voters. The idea that it's gender justice or racial, it doesn't have anything to do with any of those things. That's complete nonsense.
Also, she's doing this thing where they take a word and change its meaning on the left. That's one of their favorite things to do. The definition of the word justice is just behavior or treatment or fairness. Please tell me how it's fair to make the people who are working class pay off the student debt of wealthier people. Nothing about that is just or fair. I cannot with these people.
And then
so tired of that.
The part where she goes, it's time for GOP politicians to stop standing in the way of this relief. What she is referring to is the lawsuits that have the Biden student debt relief caught up because it's illegal and unconstitutional. And so she's saying like, she's basically saying like, stop suing about that pesky constitution and just let us do our thing here because of identity politics. Like, no, ma'am. No. I'm glad that some people, I mean, they're hypocrites on other issues, sure, but at least in this case, some of these politicians are suing over the Constitution they swore to uphold, but people like you would rather just tweet woke buzzwords while you're trampling all over it.
That's right. They're actually suing to defend people and stand for actual just treatment under the Constitution. Okay, well, I saw a fun Very Online segment. This one doesn't have any like animosity towards it at all. I just thought it was interesting. John Ehrlichman, who I believe writes for Bloomberg Markets on tech and stocks, he put out a list on Twitter of things that didn't exist on Christmas 20 years ago. Are you ready for these?
Yes, let's run through them.
Okay, first, I'll give you 5. The iPhone, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and I'll add TikTok. Now, these top things take up, I would argue, the vast majority of my time. Like, I spend a significant amount of time on these things. It's kind of crazy to think about 20 years ago. They just weren't there. What would I have been doing?
Yeah, I don't know. And the next ones are Android, Bitcoin, Tesla, iPad, and Gmail. And I'm like, okay, so you're just describing like so many things that are so integral to all of our lives and our like societal infrastructure. I like this list because it's a palate cleanser because people are such doomers. They like to act like things are always getting worse and terrible and like the good old days were so much better. Both sides will do this. But actually, like, in a lot of ways, we're getting better. Life is getting better for a lot of people. And there are downsides to some of these things, sure. But like, they're also amazing progress and communication and all these things that have made our lives better. So...
For sure. And also, currently people like to act like a lot of these companies are just so big and monopolistic and nothing could ever take them down. They have so much control. And it's like, chill a minute. They've barely been around. Like, there's still more to come. We're on the cutting edge. I mean, even things like the chat bot I've been playing with over the past couple weeks, it just shows you, like, we're still on the cutting edge of where we're going with tech and innovation and all.
We
And
need
it's
to do a
amazing
video
what's
about
going to happen.
chatbot later because it's, like, super biased.
I'm terrified of it, yet super intrigued by it, yet kind of excited about it. I have a lot of emotion, so we should do a video on that. We'll circle back to that, guys. Next on the list, we have Netflix streaming. Remember back in the day, you could just have Netflix DVDs like mailed to you?
Yes.
Amazon Prime, which, good God, that changed my life. Slack, that we could do without Slack, let's be honest. Reddit and Etsy.
Yeah, I love Reddit, actually. I get so many story ideas from Reddit. It's such a little... Now, it's toxic, to be clear. Parts of Reddit are so toxic. Oh, by the way, we started a Base Politics Reddit. So if you're a Reddit user, go to r/Base Politics Hub. We've already got over 150 people on there. We're going to be posting our content there, and maybe like we'll have some sort of section where we react to Reddit comments or read what people send us or maybe we'll do something like that. But yeah, think about it. Like Amazon, how you can now get stuff delivered at a bargain price to your doorstep like that. Like we take this stuff for granted, but it's actually huge progress. And like Netflix is a good example. Before, if you wanted to watch a movie, you would have to go to Blockbuster and hope they had it, or order it from Netflix and wait for it to come in the mail. Now you have it at your fingertips, a huge archive. I mean, these are ways our lives are getting better that people take for granted or even often decry as a bad thing. They say,
right.
Oh, tech is killing us, ruining us. And I'm like, actually, in a lot of ways, it's great.
Think of how much the left utterly hates Amazon. I'm like, Amazon is a miraculous service, and it's led to everybody else having to innovate and start offering those same kinds of services. I did hardly any Christmas shopping in person this year. It was amazing. We used to spend hours on Black Friday. Literally, people were fighting each other, trampling each other, trying to get basic goods. Now you just have it sent to your house. Like, it's incredible what we have now. Also on the list, they have WhatsApp, Messenger, Google Maps. Oh my gosh, Google Maps.
Oh my gosh,
Snapchat.
the era before GPS. What? I could never get anywhere.
Brad, people literally used to drive around in their cars and not know where they were going, and they'd pull out these giant maps, and they'd know how to read them, and then they'd keep it in their heads and follow them to their destination. It blows my mind. Think about this. How did pizza delivery guys used to find your house? They just knew how to find addresses in town. It blows my mind. It's crazy. Like,
I'm old enough to remember. I don't
is.
remember the Maps era, but I remember the MapQuest era where you would print out your instructions and then have them with you, which at least that's kind of feels like very outdated, but at least that I could have done. The whole read a map and find out how to get from Massachusetts to Tennessee, nope, could never be me.
When I was in college, I used to have to drive home from Nashville to South Carolina, which was like 5 hours. You had to go through Atlanta, which was terrifying to me. And I would print out the MapQuest, and you'd be trying to read it while you're driving. You wouldn't know if there was traffic happening. You wouldn't know if there were cops waiting to catch you. You do nothing. It was an adventure. Now, Waze diverts you, has any kind of number of ways to get there. It'll let you know if there's a car on the side of the road, if cops are, if there's a speed trap coming up. I cannot imagine. My mom used to drive around with 4 kids all over town with no cell phone and no GPS. And she's brilliant. I would be terrified. All right, let's round out the list. Also, we did not have Snapchat, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Chrome, Zoom, Skype, Spotify, Airbnb, or Uber.
Imagine how much worse. I mean, the pandemic and the lockdowns were terrible, but imagine how much worse they would have been 20 years ago without all this stuff to keep us connected. Mind blower.
Yeah. People would have gone crazy. Absolutely crazy. All right. And what's our last segment for Very Online? Oh, Piers Morgan got hacked. Say more.
So Piers Morgan, for folks that don't know, is a really prominent broadcaster, British broadcaster, who does interviews with all these famous people like Cristiano Ronaldo and Andrew Tate. But he's very controversial because he's a bit trollish. I like him, but he can definitely be a troll and a little bit of cringe sometimes.
Kind of a jerk.
Yeah, he's got that British jerkness to him for sure. But so here's a good reminder why you should always have 2-factor authentication on your Twitter account, especially if you are a public persona. Somebody hacked him last night and posted just the craziest tweets. So one of the things is that he is a huge royalist. He's a big defender of the monarchy as an institution in Britain and like the Queen, and he hates Meghan Markle and all these people. It's one of his main things. Somebody tweeted from his account, "Pissin' on the effing Queen N-word."
Oh my gosh.
So they also tweeted, "Bleep the Queen." And then they changed his name to Piers, word that starts with T.
See you next Tuesday.
Yes, and then tweeted out, "Like this tweet if y'all want to see Piers Morgan's little insert the blank."
Oh my gosh.
And he tweeted, "I like Andrew Tate's insert in the blank." They literally just went full troll on his account, had a day, they had a time, and I'm like, dude, why didn't you lock your account with 2-factor authentication?
This gives me hives. I have 2-factor authentication on everything I can think of. Like, literally, this is crazy. I mean, couldn't have happened to a better guy, I guess. All right, let's move on to the mailbag. We had a bunch of comments this week. We'll start off with some on our video last week discussing Stanford's new word guideline. Eternal, I can't say the last one. I'm not sure what that word is. Anyways, they say, on Stanford's words, one in particular I don't care to recall, F them animals. It normalizes violence against animals. Full caps, stop.
So he was pointing out that to say it normalizes violence against animals is literally just, that's food. Like, that's what people eat. Everything involving, because Stanford's list had like, oh, these words normalize violence against animals, like, what was it, like beat a dead horse. But
oh yeah,
violence against animals is normalized. We literally eat them.
True.
So I thought that was a good point. I mean, it's a little dark, but... And then Adam wrote to me, because I keep talking about blue cheese and how it's better than ranch, how did the ranch hurt you? Last time, people, the ranch, I like ranch. I dip my carrots in ranch all the time. It's like, it just has, that blue cheese is the ultimate and is better and is what you have to have with buffalo chicken.
Yeah, I think you've made that point pretty well. SL had a bunch of laughing face emojis, and they said, so now the LGBTQI plus flag includes sex workers? That's a hard no for me. Am I a boomer for not wanting to include anything besides LGB? No, I don't think you are. And it's not because I have anything against anybody else included on this new progressive flag, whatever they want to call it. It's just that, like, these are separate issues. I've never understood conflating the LGB fight for equality and acceptance with separate issues, right? Like, I think trans people have separate issues. It's a separate fight. It's a separate discussion. And then you get into things like sex workers and intersex and any number of gender issues on there. Like, fine, have that conversation, have a flag if you want, but like, quit lumping it all together. It's just sort of like this very collectivist kind of mindset, and they're just trying to get as many people in the camp to feel like victims and they're oppressed as possible because that's the commie agenda, right? Like, I mean, that's all there is to it.
They're trying to ride the coattails of the progress and of that gay people have made toward acceptance, but they don't realize is that they're actually dragging it down.
Yeah. Hard truth.
So Steele says, well, I don't really agree with the new flag. We have to remember, as far as trans issues are concerned, trans people were a major part of the Stonewall riots, which are one of the main reasons we have pride at all today. I'm very glad you commented this, because this is actually a very pernicious myth perpetuated by the progressive left, where they have retroactively retconned drag queens, which are men who identify as men who occasionally dress up as women, that were involved in the Stonewall riots, and claim that they were trans women in order to attempt to take credit for, say, trans people who did Stonewall. There were two Jamie Kirkick has written debunking this myth. He's a liberal gay author. And it's a very pernicious thing you hear all the time. It's actually not based in reality. The people involved were men who identified as men who were drag queens. They were not trans women. So the idea that trans people did Stonewall and we owe them all our gay rights is just not based. It's woke history, not actual history.
Wow, I'm really surprised you know off the top of your head. I didn't really know that. But what I will say again is, there's nothing, Brad and I love trans people. We are pro-trans people, but it is a separate cause. It is a separate issue. And I really just do think, I do agree, especially when you get into like the very woke issues of the trans movement right now, it is hurting the progress of the gay rights movement. It is setting people back. It is leading to a lot of pushback because they're taking it much further and pushing for things and things in society that have nothing to do with the gay rights struggle at all. So I think it's important to separate it. I know a lot of people that are actually in that camp feel the same way. So It Smashed 1200 said exactly the whole point of a flag is to be a symbol that represents everybody. It's not supposed to be a collection of symbols for every single person under it. Also, yeah, all else aside, just from a graphic design standpoint, it's a very bad design. I do agree with that. And yeah, I think, if you are in the LGBT community, it doesn't really matter what your gender is or what ethnicity you are, like you are represented under that flag. That's the whole point.
Yeah, so I saw a funny tweet from somebody that's like, no gay men were involved in creating this flag because its design is hideous. So up next, we've got David Recibo. He writes, the messaging before of love is love was straightforward and simple, smart branding. This is the opposite. I agree with that. I never actually loved the love is love thing because it kind of, it's like, I guess love between consenting adults is love is not as catchy, but the love is love thing is unfortunately used by a very small portion of the internet that want to attempt to normalize child abuse. And so that I'd never have loved that slogan, but I do at least agree, like branding wise, it's much better than this insane cornucopia of woke adverbs and identities and falling all over the place and crowding out the flag. This next one says that intersectionality is a dragon that always eats its own. I love how the flag is a visual representation of how incoherent the ideology is. Another guy says, absolutely love the symbolism of the rainbow flag being covered slowly with the other thing. Yes.
And then Nicholas Anderson said, drop all the crap and just go back to the rainbow flag. This needs to constantly add to the flag to represent every single subgroup is getting ridiculous. It's gone way too far, and now it just seems to be a flag that represents a political ideology rather than LGBT people. The flag should not single out or showcase certain races or identities, and if that's such an issue, maybe this community isn't for you and your interests and passions. We better use elsewhere. I don't care if that hurts.
Love it.
And then lastly, Joe Schmall said, you two are always on point. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go to hot takes. All right, I'll go first. Mine is that Auld Lang Syne is the best holiday song of all time. It is the official song of New Year's Eve. It's famous for being the song that nobody knows the words to. I also don't quite know all the words to it, but I love it. I think it's beautiful and nostalgic, and I jam it every holiday season, but especially on New Year's Eve. So
what song?
I just think it's Auld Lang Syne.
I don't.
It's the official song of New Year's Eve.
I don't know that.
Maybe we should play a little clip. Google it real fast.
Okay.
It's so pretty.
Yeah, I think I have heard that before. I just looked it up real quick, but I guess I'm not as on the hype train about it as you.
It's great. People should play it. If you don't know it, jam it. Mariah Carey actually has a great version of it.
Oh.
Shocker to no one. She's the queen of holiday songs.
Okay, so my hot take is that I am recently realizing what a piece of fine, majestic art High School Musical was at the time. I mean, it's actually legendary. It's actually iconic. The first High School Musical, people forget, was a super low budget movie. They had no idea it was going to be huge. It was a made-for-TV Disney movie with a bunch of nobodies cast in it. My boyfriend and I just rewatched it, and it was very good, but also it's just like glaring how low budget it was and like how bad some of the dialogue is, and just like, but it's so iconic still. I don't know. I just recently am realizing like so many amazing songs, original songs came out of that show. Like I mean, so many of them were still in my memory from more than 10 years ago. Soaring, flying. That one, it will always slap. It will always slap.
So I have a confession. I'm like a Broadway nut, but I've never seen High School Musical. It came out when I was in college, so I think I thought it was like too little kiddie for me or something at the time. I don't know. I never watched it. I should go back and maybe check it out because I love a musical, especially a low budget one. They're often the best when they're like plucky, kind of upstart sort of musicals. I love that. All right, guys. Well, we hope you had a Merry Christmas. Happy holidays if you're celebrating something else. Happy New Year. By the way, December marks 1 full year of Base Politics. We started the show, I think, at the end of November last year, and then we launched the company in December. So that means you guys have been hanging tight with us for a full year. You stuck with us as we got our funding, took it full time. It has been such a wild ride. And Brad and I just want you to know how much we appreciate you, how excited we are for the next year. So thanks for staying base with us. We'll see you next week and hope you have a happy 2023.